The clone trooper Tech, otherwise known as CT-9902, was a genetic mutation who belonged to Clone Force 99. With his enhanced knowledge and skills in computing and electronics, Tech complemented the skills of those in his squad, and they were known for having the highest mission success rate in the army. When Order 66 was executed, Tech was one of the squad immune to the Order, and he chose to defect from the Empire's regime in favour of becoming mercenaries. Whilst Ted wanted to avoid the ruthless Empire, this would soon change when the clones discovered Admiral Rampart's intentional destruction of Tipoca City. As clones were being replaced, Tech and Clone Force 99 knew they were being hunted down thanks to the warnings of a detained Crosshair, and to save the clone from experimentation and to gain their freedom, the clones embarked on what proved to be a fateful mission to Eriadu. The plan was to locate Dr. Hemlock with a tracking beacon, who was attending a summit headed by Tarkin to try and find Crosshair. But when the beacon is destroyed by Saw Gerrera and his own plan, the clones are forced into a fateful escape. Having tried to escape on the rail line, the explosion cuts the power from the tracks, and though Tech managed to re-establish power, damage from V-Wing starfighters splits their carriage into two. Tech would then enact Plan 99, severing its grappling cable from half of the carriage, and enabling the other half to accelerate to safety, but at the cost of his life. But what if Tech survived? Would the clone still manage freedom from the Empire? Above the skies of Eriadu, the escaping Clone Force 99 were battling the Empire and losing. Even with their superior skill, the sheer power of the TK stormtroopers and V-Wing starfighters was proving too much, and dangling thousands of meters above ground, Tech was considering his very limited list of options. The situation was worthy of his own sacrifice, but Tech decided to enact Plan 98 instead of Plan 99. Despite the protests of Wrecker and Omega, Tech raised his DC-17 blaster pistol and severed the connection to the carriage as the V-Wing starfighters approached the clones. As the other half of the railcar accelerated, Tech started to fall down, but quickly switched to his DC-15A blaster carbine to try and reattach his ascension cable to a starfighter. As he desperately wrestled to cling onto his cable, parts of the broken carriage clattered into his body and his grip started to slip. The weight of Tech was dragging the V-Wing starfighter to the surface of Eriadu, and with the clouds above him, the wing he was attached to began to crumble. Converging onto the side of the Raven's Peak mountain, Tech released the cable from the wing and he crashed into the side of the mountain. Pain rushed through the body of the clone as he slid down the mountain, and this was not helped by the explosion of the V-Wing in his proximity. Tech shot up into the air and bounced off of the fragments of the V-Wing, and now unconscious, he tumbled down the hillside and stopped on the ground. Unknown to Tech, he had just landed outside one of Eriadu's famous Lomite mines, and the miners had stopped their work to examine the body of the clone. Whilst they were tempted to melt down his armour, they decided to drag him to the more popularised city and allow him to be dealt by the rough locals. Several hours later, and with the surface of Eriadu asleep, Tech awoke in a dark room and with his legs chained to a wall. As the clone looked around the room, the computerised visor was broken, so he had to rely on his own senses to plan an escape. Though the computer terminal in his arm was also broken, Tech managed to contort his other hand around his bindings and manufactured a lockpick to free his hands. The bones in his back snapped as he untied his feet, and it took a miraculous effort to not let out a scream when he tumbled to the ground. The clone found some cloth strewn across his cell and tied it around most of his injured areas, but he still hobbled as he looked for a way out. With his visor still broken, Tech couldn't scan the network of corridors, but by the sounds of those above him, he appeared to be in a bar of some kind. What Tech needed at this moment was some way of communicating with the rest of Clone Force 99, and when he saw the Imperial patrol outside, he deduced that the planet was in a temporary lockdown. The clone slowly moved to the back entrance of the bar and picked up a vibronite from on top of a barrel. Then whilst one of the TK troopers started stumbling from inebriation, he sliced his neck and took his comlink. The Imperial chatter was quiet at night, but Tech heard that there was a search party below Raven's Peak for his remains, so an escape from Tarkin's base was out of the question. As he walked to the edge of the city, Tech saw an abandoned Republic command station, and he saw this as his chance to get help. Tech limped to the compound and repaired as much of the electronics in his armor and visor as he could, then looked for a terminal to send a coded message. After restoring the necessary power, Tech reactivated the communication station and sent a transmission to Hunter and the other clones, but as he did so, he soon heard the footsteps of the TK troopers. The command of the nearby Imperial base ordered for Tech to surrender, having been alerted by the power surge, and with several of the center's turbo lasers pointed at his face, he had little choice but to surrender. Back on the Marauder, the clones were heading back toward Mantell, with most lamenting the loss of Tech, when the comm channel started to flicker into life. The code beeps in a sequence familiar to the clones, and Hunter deciphers the transmission to conclude Tech is still alive. But with the Mega injured from the battle in the skies of Eriadu, Echo decides the clones needed to take care of her injuries, so they travelled away from their path and to the system of Rendelia. Echo had known about a Republic medical station from his time in the Clone Wars, and whilst AZI-3 used the supplies on board to heal Omega, Echo worked on locating Tech. The former clone of the 501st Legion had been monitoring any Imperial transmissions he could, but with Eriadu having been under siege, Echo thought it was a miracle that Tech had got out any kind of signal. Their only hope was to return to the planet, and this was something Hunter was less than willing to do. But when Echo received intelligence that Ord Mantell was under Imperial attack, Hunter knew that both Sid had betrayed them, and they now had no choice but to find Tech. With the Marauder now known to Imperial intelligence, the crew wanted to mask their signature in some way, and without a modulator, they decided to plant themselves onto the underside of a mining vessel. Unsurprisingly, this ambitious plan fails as soon as they approach the blockade, with the Imperial Navy firing at the clones. The clones switch to Plan B, and flying above the station's Star Destroyer, Wrecker drops their remaining smoke grenades and causes chaos amongst the blockade. Whilst the centers could pick up the signature of the Marauder, the smoke caused the V-Wing starfighters to fly into the Star Destroyer, and the clones managed to make an escape to the planet below. Echo had tried his best to locate Tech's message, but when they travelled to its coordinates, they discovered an inferno rising to the clouds. Whilst it had destroyed the terminal, it did at least prove that Tech had previously used the station. With the Imperial presence still searching for the clones over Eriadu, Hunter was able to get out of the ship, and examining the ashes that remained, he sensed that the TK stormtroopers moved further inland. The Marauder follows the instructions of Hunter and scanned over the top of the planet to find the spaceport. Dozens of TK troopers were now serving as customs and immigration officers, having replaced the local enforcement squad, and now it was Echo's mission. Leaving Hunter and the others at a rendezvous point, Echo tackled a TK trooper outside the walls of the spaceport and wore his armor on top of his own, then tried to access a data port. Echo took to hiding behind crates of cargo and scurrying to hiding places before he made it to his target. The main office of the spaceport was located in a section overlooking the area, and shielded by a number of the surrounding buildings, he attached an ascension cable to one of the flying buttresses and climbed his way onto the roof. Echo looked down into the room below, silently unscrewed the window, and leapt down to bash the heads of the TK troopers together. The clone removed the armoured disguise and placed his cybernetic scomp link into the data port and transferred data of recent departures. Such was the chaos caused by the destruction of Tarkin's base on Raven's Peak. Many of the residents on Eriadu had decided to move, and the list of departures was considerably larger than normal. Just as Echo was about to complete his transfer, a second pair of TK troopers, who were supposed to have their shift, were alerted to the silence of their colleagues. Echo quickly stunned them both with his blaster pistol, but as their comlink started to flash, the former clone trooper jumped through the hatch in the roof and sealed it before reinforcements arrived. As the TK troopers bustled into the office, Echo snuck through the tops of the spaceport, and Hunter swooped in to lower the ramp, then whisked him to safety. As the Navy was still dealing with the aftermath of Wrecker's distraction, the clones able to enter hyperspace, and Echo starts to examine the data. Through the thousands of departures, Echo singles out one which was encrypted, and it pointed to a planet in the mid-rim, one called Wayland. But without the precise coordinates, the clones needed some way of finding the planet, and an alternative to the Marauder, so Echo passes on this request to Rex. The former clone commander puts them in contact with someone on Coruscant, so Clone Force 99 embarked on yet another dangerous mission.